of bringing arts and culture leaders into the U.S. Islamic World Forum. And then Peter Singer, when he was running the forum, very kindly asked me to start convening groups of arts and cultural leaders as a component of the forum. And then Steve Grand and Durya Badani very kindly continued this tradition and invited me and some representatives back this year. But I want to give a special thanks to Martin Indyk, who throughout the number of years that we have been doing this has given incredible support and something very innovative for a think tank. I'm not really aware of any other place that has a core group of arts and cultural leaders, and in the course of our meetings over 4 years at the forum, we assembled a group of probably more than 100 arts and cultural leaders from all over Muslim-majority communities, as well as the United States. I think it's something unique in think tanks. I'm very grateful to be part of it. I also had the opportunity, through the very generous funding of the Doris Duke Foundation, to write 2 policy papers for Brookings. One, Mightier Than the Sword, was published in 2008 with the assistance of 2 co-authors from Egypt, and A New Way Forward, published in 2009 with ideas for the Obama administration. And I've continued to publish other smaller, shorter articles and op-eds. But all those are on the Brookings website on my page, so I'd encourage you, if this interests you, to take a look. But I just really want to express my gratitude to all of my friends at Brookings, Martin, Steve, Durya, for all the support for this initiative. This morning, I'm really lucky to be here with 2 veterans of the Arts and Culture Leaders Forum. At the end, Walter Parks, who's been here twice. This is your 3rd time at one of these, is that right? Walter is a film producer for many years, the co-head of DreamWorks with his wife, Laurie McDonald, now with their own company, Parks McDonald. They have a little film out now that you might have heard of, Men in Black 3. Few people around the world are watching it. Saad Massani, who's also a veteran of these fora, who's the CEO of Moby Media, Tolo TV, which is the largest independent media company in Afghanistan. And if you talk about Afghanistan, which many of us do, one of the phrases that I always associate with it from people in the State Department is something that is a success in Afghanistan is the rise of independent media, and Saad is one of the most important people behind that. And then I'm so happy to welcome a new member to the Arts and Culture Leaders Network, Khaled Abul Naga, who is an Egyptian actor, filmmaker, and activist who's been really at the center of a lot of the changes and continuing changes taking place in Egypt. One of the things that I'm particularly pleased about is that the Arts and Culture Network has actually had some very concrete outcomes. And we'll be talking about some of those partnerships today. But one is an actual project that developed out of our meetings, which is now an ongoing nonprofit. It is called MOST. Thank you, Steve Grand, who came up with this title. It stands for Muslims on Screen and Television, and it's a nonprofit organization based in Los Angeles at the USC Cinema School. And we work, I'm the co-director with Michael Wolf, who's the head of Unity Productions Foundation. We work with writers, producers, showrunners, and provide information and access to information and experts on any and everything. For some reason, there's a fly in here, so bizarre. For any and everything having to do with Muslims, Islam, Muslim-majority communities, to writers and producers, particularly television. And the goal is to facilitate the development of more authentic, varied, characters and stories that are more representative of what life is really like, and trying to get away from the stereotypes that did at one point predominate so much of Muslims as the terrorist. And we also have meetings in New York for writers and also Los Angeles, where we bring together policymakers with writers of these shows. We had a wonderful one in Los Angeles with Shadi Hamid and Khaled talking about the Egyptian Revolution. And just to give you a sense of how this works, we had writers from a number of shows, including the very popular show The Good Wife. And a few months after we had this dinner talking about the revolution, there was an episode of The Good Wife that involved the Egyptian Revolution. So we try to get these stories, these characters into popular culture. Why? Because we believe that the stories that you see in film and on television really are things that shape the way people think about the world, about themselves, and about other cultures. So a kind of framing idea that I'd like you to keep in mind as we begin our discussion is something that was said by the Nigerian novelist Wole Soyinka at a conference held at the White House in 2000 on cultural diplomacy. He said, "Politics demonizes, culture humanizes." We're all, certainly in the United States, very familiar with the way politics tends to divide people into black and white and put people on different sides. But I think in the policy world, we don't always talk so much about the capacity of culture, creative expression in all its forms, to humanize. And we will talk with you today about various ways in which storytelling, the narrative, with characters who are authentic, empathetic, who draw us in emotionally, can really shape the way we think about ourselves and about other cultures and other people, and really provide a unique insight into how societies and, of course, also politics operates. So, Saad, let me begin with you. Can you give us a sense, because there's so many different kinds of programs you do at Tolo TV and Moby Media, from 24-hour news to dramas to the Daily Show spin-off to Afghan Star. Give us a sense of the role that independent media has played in Afghanistan, plays now, and has played as Afghanistan has developed over the last 10 years or so.
Thank you, Cynthia. Excuse my voice, I'm recovering from a bad cold. In Afghanistan, I mean, obviously we had an enormous opportunity in 2001 because there was no media. So we went in there basically, and it was completely, slate was clean, and we pretty much looked around and we felt, well, why reinvent the wheel? So what we created is pretty much what works everywhere else, in terms of not just in television, but also as far as radio is concerned. So the formats and the programs that we developed are programs that have worked elsewhere, and the irony being that they also work in a place like Afghanistan. So I think conclusion after 10 years of being in Afghanistan is that the Afghans are no different to any other country or any other people. Programs that do well elsewhere tend to also resonate with Afghans. So the reality TV shows, the soap operas, the sort of pop idol types of programs, sitcoms, all of those types of programs work. But essentially, I mean, if I had to sum it up in a place like Afghanistan, I mean, I think media first and foremost entertains. People especially in a place like Afghanistan, need to be entertained. People cannot go to restaurants, they cannot go to the opera, they cannot take their families to parks and so forth. So television plays a really important role in terms of entertaining people. It informs. Afghans for the last 30 years have had their fingers on the pulse. They need to find out what's going on. There's a war going on. There's always potential for war and conflict. So they are very politically savvy, and they need to always be informed. The third thing that media achieves in Afghanistan, especially when the system is so corrupt and there is no governance, is that to a large extent media holds individuals and institutions accountable. Now, more often than not, if there is people discover something that, for example, in relation to corruption or ballot box stuffing, which we saw in both elections, people don't ring the authorities. They tend to take videos and give it to the media because they understand that media will deal with it and will expose these officials. And so media in Afghanistan plays an exceptionally important role in terms of holding people accountable. It almost plays the role of the judiciary in some ways. But last but not least, and something you've touched on before, is facilitating social change. We're not imposing anything that's new. What we're doing, we're essentially fast-tracking what's inevitable. Afghanistan is playing catch-up with the rest of the world. So they're exposed to many things that they haven't been exposed to before, and it's amazing how quickly they can adopt new things. And I think media plays a very important role in making that happen.
Let me just ask a follow-up question just to give an idea to our audience if they're not so familiar of how this operates in, I think a couple of concrete ways. In the holding government accountable, I think people might be surprised at how independent and free media is in Afghanistan and how critical you're able to be. I mean, that comes with a price. Anyone who's seen the Moby headquarters, this kind of blockaded street with this complex of buildings. It's a dangerous business, and some of your reporters have paid the price. I know you've had people arrested, and you get a lot of complaints from the government, but you persevere. So there is this sense of trust of the people with media, that they trust media, and can also themselves contribute by calling into your shows and reporting examples of corruption or things that are not being done. So there's the kind of participation of people. Then you mentioned the entertainment and fun, which, you have Afghanistan, this really destroyed country, and it seems to me that part of rebuilding that is you have to give people a sense of what is possible, a sense of what life could be, and that seems to be what some of your programs do, allow people to see the future that they want to be in. But it's not all so positive. You also have dramas like Secrets of This House that air some of the negative aspects of society, which of course is what artists always do, holding the mirror up. So talking about abuse, incest, rape, drug abuse, all of these problems. I'd be interesting to have you talk about what kind of impact that has on society. And then also the participatory programs like Afghan Star, what kind of impact you see that having. So maybe talk about those two, the Secrets of This House and Afghan Star.
Well, I think it's important to point out that, we didn't have this master plan when we went into Afghanistan. So a lot of things,
Did you have any experience in media before you did this?
No.
Yeah.
So
maybe an understatement.
That was a good thing. But no, you cannot have a didactic approach to doing these sorts of things. I mean, you try to create good dramas, and your news stories need to be honest. And pretty much, it's only with hindsight that you can discuss these things and actually interpret what you've achieved or haven't achieved. But in terms of some of the, talking about the truth is that I think as Afghans and many other people here in this room from other nationalities, we tend to blame others for our problems. And I think it's an important thing to take ownership of issues. I mean, we are responsible for a lot of our own problems. I'm sure that we can also blame others, but I think first and foremost, we have to also look within. And a society can only improve when it's being honest with itself. And we have a lot of problems in a place like Afghanistan. So there has to be a degree of honesty in terms of the things, the issues that we discuss. And you know, again, it's not me sitting there and telling our scriptwriters to write these bits and pieces. But, you know, what we've done is we've given people a lot of freedom, and people operate quite autonomously, and news and current affairs is very autonomous. It's on its own, basically. So are our writers, and so it's empowering these young people that's allowed them to develop the sorts of programs that, again, resonate with the Afghan public.
Now, I want to just conclude with you, Saad, with talking about a relationship that you formed through the Arts and Culture Leader Forum with Howard Gordon, who is the executive producer of 24 and now of Homeland. And as he's someone who's come a number of times, was very sorry not to be able to join us this year. Might seem strange for those of you who remember 24 or who saw any of the early years of 24 to think of the creator and executive producer of that program as a kind of poster child for treating Muslims and Muslim-majority communities and all related subjects with compassion and truth, but that is indeed who Howard Gordon is. And it was significantly actually through his experience coming here and participating in these meetings and engaging with the arts and culture leaders that he moved forward with his ideas of how to change 24, and anyone who's seen season 7 on sees how the Muslim characters change from being the villains to being the heroes in that program. And you see a very nuanced approach in his new series, Homeland. But tell a little bit about the particular partnership that you formed with Howard as a result of these meetings and what's behind it.
Well, I was happy, you know, I mean, obviously I met Howard thanks to you and this forum, but Howard, as busy as he was, volunteered once that he would assist if we were to do anything like 24 in Afghanistan. So we developed this format for a police show called Eagle 4, which was a sort of elite police unit within the police force that was actually not corrupt and was very effective. And it was a 13-part series, which actually recently won an award at an International Drama Awards. But Howard was kind enough to read every script of the show and pass on his comments, which I think made a hell of a difference when you have someone of his caliber. And obviously, we lack the capacity to develop these sorts of shows on our own. Or if they are, they're not going to be nearly as good as some of the shows which have worked well internationally. So I think it's important that, you know, when people volunteer their time and their services, it can make a hell of a difference to people like us.
Thank you, and I think it's worth mentioning that this program, Eagle 4, which is now in its second year, was underwritten by the U.S. government through the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, through the public diplomacy program there, recognizing, and this was initiated under David Ensor, recognizing that through this narrative, it would be a way to communicate to the Afghan population who the police are, who they could be, the valuable positive role they can play in society. So, you know, there are a lot of ways you can do that. You can have seminars, you can make speeches, you can write op-eds, or you can help create a really gripping drama that brings people there through stories. So that's fantastic how well that has worked out. But let me just, having said that, I think an important point that you made is that Howard's collaboration helped create really good, authentic stories. So the instrumentalization, you know, only works if it stands on its own as a quality, good piece of art and piece of media. Walter, that's a good tie-in to you. Before you came to the forum this time, you stopped in Abu Dhabi because you now have a partnership with the Abu Dhabi Media Company as part of your new company, Parks McDonald. But a few years ago, when you first came here, you'd never been to Abu Dhabi before. So help us understand how this partnership came about, and then we'll talk about some of the things you're doing with it.
Well, great. My story in that regard is another, I think, indication of the possible concrete developments that can come from these sorts of...
Maybe put the mic just a little closer. Thank you.
Okay, my story is a good example of the sorts of concrete developments that can come from these sorts of cultural explorations. And I actually owe a lot to Martin and Stephen and to Cynthia in terms of providing an inroad which I think has a great mutual benefit, both professionally and culturally. Like a good story, it seems random until the end, and it seems inevitable. I first came to this region as being one of the producer of the film The Kite Runner. I spoke about it at Brookings. I met Cynthia. I was asked to come to the first U.S. Islamic Forum. I met an amazing woman named Nashwa Al-Rawani, who introduced me to the people at Abu Dhabi. I went there on my second time. We had conversations about financing our development, my company's development, because our independence is very important. A fund was created, but like so many of the investments in the Emirates and in Abu Dhabi, there's always an aspect of local capacity building. And what has evolved is a kind of reciprocal arrangement in which I try to provide expertise, as much as I have any, to their desire to build local capability. And its richest expression is just happening right now. A few months ago, I got a phone call from my partners at Image Nation asking if I'd be interested in helping them do something, to do an hour drama about the legal system in Abu Dhabi. But what they wanted to do was try to bring the sophistication of the storytelling and the production values up to a level that heretofore has not been seen in the Gulf. And I found it a very fascinating idea. I was excited by the idea. And as a result, I've brought in a fine showrunner writer, a man named William Finkelstein, who's known for his work in LA, to work with a group of young Emirati filmmakers and writers to try to develop stories centering around the legal process there. Now, that might have been their intention, but I have to approach it as a storyteller. And the concept we came up with is the main characters are a venerated and powerful and well-respected Abu Dhabi lawyer and his daughter, who has gone to America for school and law school and has come back and chosen to be a lawyer in Abu Dhabi. Now, putting an empowered woman in the middle of this show is something that's personally interesting to me, and I think it's a good thing to do. I also find that it's a good, interesting way to communicate and dramatize the particular ironies and conflicts that are involved in a society like that, which is at one time rapidly modernizing, is affluent, and yet is trying to grapple and hold on to traditions, religious, cultural, ethnic, etc. The interesting thing is that we can discuss all of those values in the context of a meeting like this in terms of their political or social or cultural value. We're going after those values because they are intrinsic to a good storytelling. At the end of the day, what we can do, and I agree with you, Saad, is try to entertain our viewers with the best of intentions. And the interesting thing is that quality stems from an accurate, truthful observation of human behavior. And therefore, if you go for quality, and if you include in your definition of quality an accurate, truthful, compassionate representation of human behavior, the possibility of social change long term, we are not activists, but in terms of presenting role models, stories, conflict resolutions, etc., in an entertaining way is greatly enhanced. And we're at the very beginning of the process. We're just now, in fact, writing the first script, but it looks like we very well may be in production within the next 6 months. And it's a very exciting example of how the cross-fertilization of these different fields can work. I hope.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful example, and I maybe just will go through the different steps just so people understand how this goes. I mean, you start with the judiciary in Abu Dhabi wanting to have a program, a series that will tell a story, and presumably a pretty good story, about their judicial system. So they come to you saying, we want this to be about our judicial system, and then, of course, to make that a good story, it has to be about people and about their story. And through that, as we know from all of our crime programs, you'll have something about the legal system and the judicial system. But I think it's so interesting how you've found a way to take this, where we started with the judicial system, and come to what is, one of, if not the core challenge in the Gulf region right now, which is this fascinating intersection, collision of tradition and modernity. And as this region really wants to move ahead and become modern, but equally strongly wants to hold on to their traditions.
It's the essential conflict we're trying to explore in the show. There are two sets of characters that are important in this show. One is the set of characters that hopefully will be seen every night in Ramadan to many viewers in the region. And the second is this group of characters who are going to be making the show. Is a very important aspect of what we're trying to do. Storytelling and filmmaking, there is an expertise involved. It's not a culturally imperialistic a position to take that there are forms, the reality shows that you've talked about that have been developed in other contexts that translate beautifully into one such as this. So what we're trying to do is bring seasoned professionals, but in so doing, train and develop local talent. And our plan would be that if we're successful, there would be a gradual handover of the reins of this show from the kind of the professional Hollywood-based patrons of the moment towards the Emirati talent base, that hopefully a show can really be a powerful tool in terms of instruction. When you have to put out 30 episodes, it's extraordinary the amount of experience a young writer or a director or an assistant director editor gets over the course of just a few months. So you have to look at it in terms of what the potential message of the show is, but also in terms of the potential for capacity building in the local environment is.
So then it leaves a really lasting impact, both in terms of the program, but in terms of the talent that you develop. I think so often and there are all these great film festivals here, and when American stars come, inevitably, they're always quoted as saying, oh, they need to tell their own stories, as if this were some wildly, blindingly novel idea. Because of course, people here want to tell their own stories, but this is a different approach to say, how do you tell your own stories in a global language that will really resonate in your own culture, but really work as storytelling. And as you say, this is something that American filmmakers, not uniquely, but American filmmakers and television makers are really good at. So we really look forward to seeing the results.
We'll know in a year if it worked.
Hopefully we'll be talking about the second season next year. Khaled, welcome to the forum. It is really great to have you here. We met on a stage kind of like this in equally large, daunting chairs in Alexandria, Egypt in June 2010, when the library held a conference that had the intention of building on President Obama's 2009 Cairo speech to develop concrete partnerships between American entities and entities in the Arab world. At least our partnership came out of that. I don't know what else, but that did anyway. And I want to go with you, keeping in mind this storytelling concept and its importance in the Arab world. I want to talk with you first about something that actually is in that 2008 white paper, where we talk about the concept of artists being the canaries in the coal mine. Artists being the ones who go out ahead and kind of push the boundaries in society that goes two ways. They're pushing outwards, but it also means that artists are a way, and their products are a way to understand societies, particularly societies where the political leaders don't represent the people, as was true, still is true for so many years, at least for the next couple of weeks, was true for so many years in Egypt. So let's talk for a little bit about how you see that and using your film microphone, which as an example, what something like that microcosm of arts and of hip-hop artists and graffiti artists in Alexandria, which is the topic of that film, what that could tell policymakers like this about Egypt, and what would they know if they had been watching your movie instead of reading policy briefs about Egypt.
Thank you, Cynthia. Honored to be here sitting with this distinguished panel and the distinguished presence. I will speak in English, but I will speak in Arabic as well, so be prepared with your headsets. Yesterday, I was invited to talk about the revolution, the Arab Spring, my feelings about it and what's going on in Egypt and the Arab world. And for a minute, I just asked myself, what the hell am I doing here? I'm an actor, motion picture actor and producer, only 2 films. I started producing Heliopolis and then Microphone. What am I doing here? And then when I spoke out yesterday, and I've been speaking with a lot of people around here, I felt that actually everybody's telling me, you're saying what everybody should, you're bringing your heart out, that's great. Keep pushing the boundaries, great. And I asked myself, why am I the one maybe pushing it? And I think the answer came up to me this morning, because it's not my job. I think there's something great about people talking about something they are passionate about, like politics, like the Arab Spring, like arts. But right here, talking about it is not my job. So I'm not afraid to lose my job speaking to you about it. So I will be honest. I will make some
Brookings
people...
is very powerful, Don't assume that you won't lose your... No, I'm kidding.
So I'm really not afraid if some of you will feel angry of what I'm going to say. Or some of you will feel, yeah, this is what I felt, but nobody's saying it. Because I might not be invited again to talk here. And that's totally okay with me.
That is always a possibility with this group.
I know. I'm starting to feel it. So, art humanizes, politics demonizes. That's pretty much true of the time we're living in. But not necessarily. Not necessarily. The definition of politics and politicians is the art of the possible. It's just we have politicians who are so not creative lately. I think politicians should study some art. I think we should invite a lot of politicians to study some art as part of their being ready to become presidents or policymakers. I invite the outcome of this panel to tell policymakers, please spend a year making film. Spend a year knowing real stories about your own town. It doesn't matter where. Go there. Just learn how to make art. Because what I'm about to tell you, answering your question, is...
Can I just interrupt you
Yep.
really quickly? Just in case they don't have enough time to actually learn to make film. It's possible. I'm sure Martin's ready to give everyone a sabbatical now to go join Walter in Abu Dhabi and help develop this series. But just in case that doesn't happen, there is, I think, something practical to what you've just said, which is to spend a year watching film, to add that to what you do. So I'm going to come back to that. What if, say, the Egypt policymakers here had been watching with the same kind of seriousness they might read a policy paper, say the most popular film that came out of Egypt in the last 10 years, the Yakubian Building, or your film Microphone, which debuted on January 25th, 2011, which may sound cool to all of you. That's, of course, the day the revolution began, but it's actually not cool for Khaled because it meant that nobody went to his movie, of course. Everybody went to the real thing. But now they can see it. But what would they have learned if they had watched either of those movies? For example, what would they have seen about Egypt that would be different from...
If I asked anybody in this room or outside this room, would you have foreseen the Arab Spring one day before it happens? Would you have known that there will be full-fledged revolutions all over the Arab world, the streets of Tunis inspiring, the streets of Cairo inspiring, the streets of Syria inspiring, the Yemenis, the Libyans, even here in the Gulf, even in Morocco, but it's not as a revolution, but more of a change and reform? The answer will be no. Nobody expected it. Even Mubarak said Egypt is not Tunis. Gaddafi said, oh, Libya is not Egypt or Tunis, and so on. But guess what? The Egyptians proved they are Tunisians. And the Libyans proved they are Egyptians and Tunisians. And the Yemenis proved they are Egyptian Tunisians. And the most important message that we've learned in our lifetime, I think, right now, politically, socially, is this amazing outcry of this region telling the whole world we are one. So, no one would have said we've anticipated the Arab Spring. Wrong. Watch movies 3, 4, 5 years ago, coming out from this region. Movies like 1-0, 1-0, movies like Heliopolis, movies like Microphone. These are movies that if you see them now, Cynthia, when she saw that, he said, oh my God, the artists knew. لما الناس شافت فيلم زي مايكروفون قالوا انتوا ازاي عرفتوا ان في هتكون ثورة في مصر؟ احنا ما عرفناش. Which brings me to the most important point. If you're an artist and you are honest in the depiction, even of a fictional character, but you're honest to everything around it, you don't only predict, you don't only depict this character or this story, you depict much more. You depict a whole environment out. انت بتتكلم على بيئة كاملة بتطلع لو انت فعلا فنان صادق. And this is why I believe this panel is one of the most important panels in this whole forum. Because none of the politicians knew there will be an Arab Spring. But if you paid attention to the artists, you'd have probably predicted and felt change is about to happen here. Why? I believe the key words we said, Walter said it, Saad said it, Cynthia said it, it's truth, honesty, compassion, good quality of talent, basically, talent of telling a story. All these put together creates something that politicians couldn't. With all this, I mean, can you imagine the eruption of the Egyptian revolution and Hillary Clinton was saying, the Mubarak regime is very strong and stable. Having the biggest embassies in the world, in the Middle East, with thousands of people working and telling you, giving you reports, and you have no clue what is going on. But one honest artist predicted it, or 2, or 3, or 4. That's why this panel is much more important than anything else. Arts and culture is your key to understand people. If I ask you another question, what is the one language that you'll make a movie or a TV show or any medium communication medium with, like English, Arabic, what is the one language that everybody in the whole world will understand? You'll say, none. There's not one language that you can say English is predominant because it is now, or Arabic in some areas in the Arab world, of course, or Chinese in Asia, but actually, no, there is one language. Again, one word we said, I think it's a key word. It's the language of human feelings. That's why honest art transcends all the barriers, all the frontiers, all the political barriers. This is why a movie from Iran, A Separation, will be felt and moving and move people in the States. And this is why a movie about young people in the film Microphone will be understood and people would be moved by it in Australia or Brazil. And this is actually the most important aspect of why arts and culture does magic, because the language it speaks is not English or Arabic or Hebrew. It's the universal language of human feelings. And that's why this is a very important panel. The language that we all speak is human feelings. The language that touches us all and makes us change our decisions, and Cynthia will tell you more about scientific facts about that, is actually our human feelings. To end and answer your question, actually, is I can't tell you how important it is that, and I'm going to switch to Arabic to finish this, that we should all pay attention to our art. I can't tell you how much I feel I want to cry. I really sometimes listen to some artists and I want to cry because they have no idea. They have no idea of the wealth of art and culture of this region. I was walking on the red carpet on Tribeca Doha Film Festival a few years ago when it started here, and a journalist gave me the mic on the red carpet and said, "How do you feel about bringing film and cinema to the Middle East?" A few years back. She had no idea that film was made here in the Middle East before Hollywood. Alexandria produced movies for Europe before Bollywood. The black and white, beautiful film era still stands as an amazing heritage of filmmaking. One movie changed laws for women, أريد حلاً, Fatin Hamama, and so on. And I feel horrible that artists don't share this knowledge, they don't research it well. So please, for the US or the Western artist, do some research. Understand this arts and culture of this region before coming and bringing the know-how, which is great, of course. And on the other side, I feel I want to cry when I see Arab artists or filmmakers or media people not embracing their heritage and basically just looking up for Hollywood. With all due respect, it's great. But that's not it. What will make you make great art and great culture is right here with you. Is right with you. Is telling your story, your true story, which we probably don't want to talk about because you think it's never been done before, but this is it, you have it. Switching to Arabic and finishing this, I just want to say, كنت بعمل مشروع مع شباب عن حكي. هم بيعملوا مونولوجات اسمها مونولوجات بصي. هم عزموني على العرض وفوجئت ان العرض اتلغى وبعدين رحت تاني وبعدين فوجئت العرض اتلغى. في الاخر عملوا العرض وفوجئت ان العرض بيتعمل في جراج الأوبرا في القاهرة، لأنهم اتمنعوا إن هم يعملوا عرضهم في أي مسرح. ليه؟ لأنهم كانوا بيحكوا جوابات. عملوا إعلان وقالوا لو عندك قصة عايز تقولها من غير ما تقول اسمك ابعتها لنا، حاجة أثرت فيك، قصة حقيقية، المهم تكون حقيقية. وأخدوا الجوابات دي وكل اللي عملوه إنهم وقفوا على المسرح قروها. أبسط حاجة ممكن تعملها في شكل فني، مسرح حكي. وهو ده حاجة من ثقافتنا العربية، إنك تحكي. الراجل اللي كان بيمشي من بلد لبلد يقول جواز عتريس من فؤادة باطل، أو يحكي قصة فولكلور، ده جزء أصيل من الثقافة العربية. لما وقفوا وعملوا المسرحية بتاعتهم وحكوا ده، جت الرقابة منعتهم في جزء، وجت الرقابة تاني يوم، وفي الآخر المهم عملوا المسرحية بتاعتهم، وأنا اهتميت بيهم جدا وصورنا المشروع دوت. وقامت الثورة في مصر. لما قامت الثورة في مصر قرروا يعملوا نفس الموضوع وسط التحرير، حكي. وماتوا ناس من اللي حكوا للأسف. شباب حكى اللي حصل له، وللأسف هم النهاردة شهداء ثورة 25 يناير. ولا يمكن أنسى الجملة دي، ودي اللي هختم بيها. وقفت سندس شبايك ومنى الشيمي، البنتين اللي بيحكوا القصة ديت، وقالوا اللي بيحكي مش بيموت، اللي بيحكي مش بيموت. The one who tells will never die.
Thank you very much, Khalid. Thank you. I want you all to be thinking of your questions now. We have a microphone circulating. I think we'll take several because unfortunately we have to wrap pretty soon, very soon. For those of you who didn't have earphones, let me just quickly summarize. And if you have a question, raise your hand and we'll get the mic to you. Khalid was telling very moving story about young people telling stories in a garage area because they were being censored. They then brought those stories to Tahrir when the revolution broke out, and sadly some of these young people died in the revolution, but was said about them was a storyteller, and a story never dies. So who would like to ask a question? And could we please get the microphone to, could you raise your hand, please? Thank you so much. And please introduce yourself briefly, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ramina Shashibi. I'm the Executive Director of the Inner City Muslim Action Network, a community organization on the south side of Chicago that, among many other things, is very active in the production of arts and culture programming. So first I want to...
Just keep going. Sorry, we're just running out of time. So go ahead and ask your question, Rami.
Very quickly, I want to acknowledge the importance of this panel and get to a question regarding something that came up in the course of the conversation. I think it was Mr. Parks, you referred to the term of kind of a cultural imperialism. And I know subtly sometimes, I think you've all agreed that strong, compelling art is honest art. How do you negotiate, and this is specifically, I think, to our brother Saad, who's doing this production in Afghanistan, phenomenal work, but how do you retain a level of credibility and honesty with the production of art while possibly and inadvertently adhering to a narrative that is being funded or perceived to be funded by external forces or external entities that have agendas that sometimes are more explicitly political and not as honest and raw as transcendent art can be?
Well, I think that's an important issue, and I think we're very mindful of not being used, but at the same time, obviously, for us, and I think that's the case in a lot of sort of new markets, producing local content is very expensive, because you cannot amortize the cost in terms of selling to different markets. But so therefore, external funding is important when we can get it. But at the same time, and obviously we have to be, I mean, I think that anything that's seen as too much of a propaganda piece is going to be rejected by the viewers. I think that's probably the most important thing, especially in a place like Afghanistan, or even in the Arab world, I mean, viewers are very savvy in terms of, if it's a piece that's, not there to entertain, but to actually, influence. I think people will be very mindful of those sorts of programs, will not watch them. So we have to, there are a lot of things. Governance is an important issue to us as Afghans, and maybe an important issue for the external funders. So there are common things, but obviously it's a very fine line. We have to be very careful in terms of not crossing those lines, and I'm sure some people do, and if they do, then people stop watching those types of programs. But the one thing is that you talk about culture and you talk about the arts. I don't think it exclusively belongs to anyone. I mean, you look at a lot of these concepts and formats are developed in Asia, redeveloped in the US, resold to the Middle East, and vice versa. And there will be formats which will then be developed in a place like the Middle East. We have developed our own formats, which we're now trying to package and sell to Western countries. So it goes both ways. I don't think that anything exclusively belongs to anyone. It's something that continues to it's very fluid, these ideas, and as they go from one region to another region. But your point is a very important one, and I think people try to influence not just the Westerners, but there are a lot of other forces as well trying to influence the narrative.
May I just add one thing, is that the truth of the matter is, if you're a practitioner of a commercial, quote-unquote, art form, you're always having to deal with what the agenda of the financier is. It could be a nation, it could be a network. And part of your job, if you're going to do it right, is to somehow filter out and balance those, whether they're political or strictly economic. You'll have an argument with a network about, well, yeah, we're not really going after our demographic. Well, okay, that's not really my business. We're here to tell the story in the most honest and compelling way possible, which is why, at the end of the day, it comes down to, and it sounds highfalutin, I don't mean it to be, but trying to tell the truth as well as you can. And hopefully it is part of our job to filter out as much as possible those influences which would deleteriously affect what we're trying to say. But it's true internationally, nationally, wherever you have an art form or an expressive form which requires large investment.
Thank you very much. We've been given a bit of extra time, 10 more minutes or so from now. So I see 3 hands. Why don't we take the 3 questions and answer them? Please go ahead.
Trudy Rubin from the Philadelphia Inquirer. At the beginning of the Tunisian Revolution, or shortly thereafter, a cinema was burned down, and there was pressure against running the film Persepolis because it happened to have one image of something that was described as God. I'm wondering now that Arab countries are moving out of secular dictatorships, how much are you worried about censorship from religious forces in Egypt, your experience in Afghanistan, and how will you be able to press back against that?
Thank you very much, Trudy. Where were the other questions? Could we take the mic right over here? Oh, well, I guess not. Don't panic. We'll get to you. Right here is a question. So the first question then about potential increased censorship with the change of regimes. Yep.
Nikan Kusar from khodnevis.org.
Can you just hold the mic a little closer? It's hard to hear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nikan Kusar, khodnevis.org. It's for Mr. Mohseni. You have had some, I believe, problems showing your programs in Iran, Farsi 1. Could you describe the sensitivities of your programs for the Iranian government and how they disliked what you have been doing in the past few years? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. We had one other question in the back.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Just following up on the question about the...
Would you mind introducing yourself, please?
My name is Muhammad Majid. I'm the president of Islamic Society of North America and Imam of Adams Center, Virginia. The question about the relationship between religion and art. These are very crucial discussions, I do believe, in coming years. And I would like to suggest that as you talked about politicians seeing arts, think we should have an honest discussion with some religious figures in Egypt and other part of the Muslim world where the revolution have taken place about the relationship between religion and arts. Because I think there will be more tension in the coming years. And I would like to volunteer myself to be part of that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Imam Majid. We're going to take you up on that. You'd be great to have as part of it. Thank you. So we have 3 questions. Censorship, potential increased censorship with the change of regimes, and also in Afghanistan. Why don't we start with that first? And I think you can weave into that the issue of religion and art, and how do you deal with that? You go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Well, you know, when I talked earlier about the key words here, we said, you know, trying to be honest so that you can be trusted. So what happens when people watch a movie, for example, or they're subjected to art, the initial thing is that they trust the artist. And if they don't trust the artist, it's not going to work. And that's what happens with a lot of you know, propaganda art. Propaganda art is not really art. It's basically embedded messages in movies or whatever. And that is something that we've lived with in the Arab world. But the young generation can tell. And that differentiation is very important. Now, historically, going back about censorship, the most wonderful movies, the most wonderful art was made during the worst of censorship. And if you try to analyze that, try to understand that, it always boils down to that it really doesn't stop you, censorship. It really doesn't stop you. It just makes you more creative. It just makes you more of an intelligent artist trying to tell your story without being cut off, or your story being, you know, censored in parts or in total. So most of my when I talk about making movies and censorship, yeah, of course, I would love to have no censorship whatsoever. But amazing filmmakers from Egypt, great cinematographers, great storytellers, and songwriters and artists did it for so long, during even worse times, during real dictatorships, like real censorship, and they got away with it. And it's classics. So I'm not really that concerned about that, because artists at the end of the day learn their way through that, and they did get away with that. Now, if you're talking about religious concerns, we can talk about that for a very long time. And you know what? I don't really think this is a very important debate. It's a made-up debate. It's a debate for all those religious, neo religious politicians, now that they have the chance to be in politics, which is wonderful. I think it's great, to show that we are here. What do? You say, oh, Adil Imam has to go to prison because he...
The most famous...
Adil Imam is one of the most very, very, very famous comedians, and did a lot of great movies, and is loved all over the Arab world, and maybe the Muslim world as well. And what that creates is, it creates media. It creates talk. So now we know, like you have asked your question, because, oh, now we know there's something changing. Oh, now we know that this new religious politicians are there and they're going to be changing things. Guess what? This is probably the 20th time that Adil Imam was subjected to that. It's just that you're paying attention to it now because it's happening after in that context. And the timing is really stupid. I'll tell you what happened. What happened was, because Adil Imam was pro-Mubarak in the beginning, in the first days of the revolution, and I mean, he has his opinion, of course, what happened was a lot of those religious politicians thought that now, coming back at Adil Imam, he will not have any backing from the artists, and then we can maybe make an example of him. It completely backfired. All of the artists of Egypt combined backed up Adil Imam,
And you can't just basically try an artist for making a comedy about terrorists or Islamic fundamentalists, and at the end of the day, it's a comedy. الإرهاب والكباب. I don't know if anybody knows that movie. But anyway, so to tell you the truth, don't lose your time thinking about that. It's a made-up thing. We can lose a lot of time talking about it. It's not real, and it's not going to happen. The reality is, artists have been living with that for so long. You said that you don't know. The world didn't know.
I'm going to just quickly turn to Saad. Maybe you can talk about the future of independent media in Afghanistan if, for example, the next government is more conservative, if the Taliban is a part of it in some way, for example, or if it is more conservative, how do you see the future and your challenges with censorship? And then also something about Farsi One, which we didn't mention, which is your part of your expansion, the network that goes into Iran, and talk about your challenges there with Iran.
I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, we are witnessing the radicalization of, certainly of Afghanistan and of our neighborhood, including Pakistan and as well as some of these Arab countries. I think we will shift to the right. I think there will be more censorship. But, you know, I think that it will self-correct in the next 10 to 20 years. So 20 years is nothing, or 10 years is nothing. I think that the shift in Afghanistan is more political. It's obviously one of the things that we have to bear in mind. It's usually, the silent majority doesn't have much of a say with these sorts of things. It's usually the political establishment. In Afghanistan, it's more about talks with the Taliban, and therefore the state is repositioning its stance vis-a-vis the media. And we're seeing that. So as a television company, you see these things on a day-to-day basis because you get more letters, you get more indictments, you get more court cases, you get summoned before the various commissions. You have various ulama councils condemning what you're doing. And there's no doubt that there's a lot more of that today than there was in 2002. In relation to Farsi One, our friend asked us, we established a network of television stations that are pan-Persian that go into the region, including Iran, and they're very popular. We don't have any political agendas. We tend to be telenovelas and soap operas dubbed into Farsi. The Iranian state, sometimes seems very sensitive. I think partly because they are popular. And there's a degree of paranoia maybe in relation to these types of programs. But certainly our intention is, again, to entertain. And there are many people who want to watch these types of programs, and we're providing a service.
Again, I think it's interesting, the two examples you cited, Adel Imam being persecuted again. Of course, humor is such a powerful weapon. Look at the influence of The Daily Show and Jon Stewart, which is being picked up in different versions all around the world. And for you, it looks innocent telenovelas, but of course, these are powerful stories that present alternative narratives to the one of the Iranian government. And so people are very influenced by them, even though they aren't political per se. I saw one other hand, which I think we have time to take one more question, then I'll give everybody a chance to do a wrap-up comment. Please go ahead. Thank you. Do we have there we go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mustafa Akil from Turkey, and I have a question to Khalid, but if any other participant would like to answer, I'll be happy. There has been much discussion in Turkey about the Turkish soap operas, which became fashionable in the Arab world. I mean, are we exaggerating the influence of that in Turkey, or is that really a cultural phenomenon? Some people have argued that it has helped for the more conservative Arab societies like Saudi Arabia to see a more relaxed or open culture relatively in terms of gender relations. So I'd just like to learn if you have any observations on that. Thank you so much.
So question, and I don't know, Saad, if you have a comment about that too, about the Turkish soap operas, which have been so influential in the Arab world. So
yeah, sure. Okay. Turkish soap operas. For someone who's been watching a lot of TV around the world, like I've been doing that because of Team Cairo. Team Cairo, let me just introduce you to this concept very quickly, it's a club of filmmakers, independent filmmakers in Egypt and the Arab world, based in Cairo right now, but we're expanding. There's one in Jordan opening soon too. What we're doing is collecting resources like Image Nation, who has a lot of resources to make films, and for example, Canon or any company that has equipment that can help
See, these cameras, actually, we shot a movie microphone using these cameras, the DSLR cameras, which is a new technology, which gives the technology of making film to any film student. So, Team Cairo, this concept of bringing talents, young, talented, independent filmmakers and storytellers with resources is one way of basically creating this new revolution of wave of filmmakers into the Middle East. Now, so I've been watching a lot of TV around the world, and I tell you, the quality of TV in the Arab world is light years behind of what's happening in the world. And that's surprising because filmmakers are much better. Films coming out from Egypt and Jordan and Tunisia and the Arab world is much better. So something is wrong because the money is not in film, the money is in TV. The TV networks have the money. Actually, they produce the movies. You know, Rotana and all the companies, they are the ones who make the movies. So something is wrong. I think it's laziness, stagnation. Just like our Arab leaders who fell one by one, the producers of the TV are so lazy, are so bad, that I think now, very soon, we'll find a revolution in that as well. We're seeing some good quality shows, but not all of them. So Turkey was discovered. All of a sudden, if you dub, because it's a very close culture, very, very, very close to our cultures, so it was discovered one day by one incident because somebody thought that maybe we can dub it in Arabic and use it, and you know, they have our names, Fatma and Ali and so on, and it was very close to the culture. So that discovery of good quality, well, I'll have to tell you, it's not really good quality related to the world, but it's much better than what we have in our TV networks, was discovered. When that was discovered, it created what you said. What I see from this is that there's so much room for making better TV quality. There's so much room with what Walter is doing in his show to show that you can make up-to-date quality, standard, international standard TV. And the Middle East have the money and the networks have the money to make it. It's that they're so lazy, they work with very old-fashioned systems that create very bad quality TV. So it's just about a revolution like what happened with our leaders. All those TV shows that are horrible, mediocre quality, stories filling up all these hours on the TV networks are going to fall one by one, just like our leaders fell one by one.
Can I make one
I'd
very
like
quick,
to give Saad and Walter a chance to
I just
couple
want to
more
say that
comments, and we're going to go.
as a broadcaster, we're fairly agnostic as to what we show. The shows have to actually work with the audiences. Those Turkish shows are bloody good. They're very good. We show all of them. Fatima Gul and Five Sisters and Magnificent Century and Ishq-e Mamnu, Forbidden Love. These shows are wonderful shows. We've tried everything. We've tried Western shows, we've tried Eastern shows, you know, Korean shows and so forth. These shows somehow work well in the Middle East. Don't know the reason, they work well. The thing that's going to make a difference is competition. The Turkish market is exceptionally competitive. It's a multi-billion-dollar advertising market. The entire Turkish market, the entire Arab market is not as big as the Turkish market. The Turkish market is massive. So that competition, that competition actually ensures that we have good quality programs coming out of Turkey. As the market opens up in the Middle East and people compete, the likes of Rotana and NBC and so forth are somehow subsidized television networks. You know, that commercial, you know, ratings don't factor in as to what programs they have. They don't actually cut programs if they don't work after 2 weeks. They keep on showing them. So I think competition will ensure that we have better quality programs coming from the region.
Walter, I'm going to let you have the next to last word before Steve closes.
I see Steve like a blinking light in an award show saying, wrap it up.
But still.
I think we're good. I believe in, let the audience should want more.
All right. I'm turning over to you, if you would like to.
Well, just a big thank you to all our panelists for just a really terrific, terrific session. And a big thank you to Cynthia Schneider, who has been working for years to bring artists and creative people from the United States and various Muslim majority countries together. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
A couple quick housekeeping announcements. Someone has lost their glasses. Someone else is missing an iPad. All of us got these lovely bags from the Cutteries. The problem is they look the same, and I think someone may have accidentally walked away with a bag that is not theirs, that contains someone else's iPad. If you have information on either, please see a Brookings staff member. Finally, working groups are beginning right now for those who are participating in working groups, and we'd urge you to leave.
Steve, can I
Thank you.
just add one quick thing that I forgot? A PSA for people who are leaving on Friday morning. There is coincidentally going to be a screening of Khaled's movie Microphone at Education City on Thursday night. If there's interest, maybe we can figure out a way to get people there to see it, and Khaled will be commenting afterwards, hopefully. But the film is being screened here Thursday night, so we'd be happy to have people go see it.
We'll tell you the details later.
Yeah. Thank you all. Thanks, guys.
It's an interesting, completely different perspectives.